All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you could join us for this Grantee panel on innovative ways to operationalize topic C and D concepts. So we're really glad that you're here. I hope you all enjoyed Dr. Hahn's talk this morning. And we're going to continue on in this session, taking a little deeper dive into how folks operationalize topics C and D. And to start us off, we will have three presenters. Anne Mosack, who is the president and CEO of Ascend, will start. And then next we'll hear from Natasha Mueller. And Natasha is the education director of Willing to Wait in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And over the last 5 years, Natasha's led her staff to inspire over 5,500 young people a year toward optimal health. Her passion to empower other leaders in the field of sexual risk avoidance has increased the use of Willing to Wait curriculums, both nationally and internationally. Natasha holds a BA in education and utilizes her teaching skills both in the US and abroad. In addition, she holds an SRA credential and certifications in TESOL, marketing, and career development. Natasha is both a birth parent and an adoptive parent who loves reminding people that nothing can change their value. So thank you for being with us, Natasha, and welcome. Next, we will hear from Cemeka Agugbuem Smith. And Cemeka holds a doctorate in interdisciplinary biomedicine, medical science. And she's been the program coordinator for Little Rock Life Skillz for 3 years and has been implementing programming in Little Rock schools for over 4 years. And in addition, she's assisted in the SRAE mission with technical assistance, grant writing, and especially enjoys leading youth to examine their thought processes as they strategize on choices, relationships, and future goals. So welcome, ladies, and thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank you, Scott. And once again, welcome everyone who's joining us for the second day of the training. We are going to look today at topic C and D, and as you can see on your agenda. And I, again, want to say to us, let's look at these topics through the lens that Dr. Hong has really been developing for us regarding psychological self-sufficiency in overcoming barriers. And today he talked about how the TIP, transforming the impossible to possible, could be applied to topics C and D. And remembering his very sound advice to listen to youth, as he said yesterday, as we guide them, through the context of these topics. And also, I love the fact that when Kendi, who was the MC today, she opened it up and asked what people remembered. There were a number of people who said they referred to Dr. Hong talking about this is not, us and them, that we are all the us. He reiterated that today, and he talked about all of us have barriers. All of us are vulnerable. And we can bring that experience, and we bring our, also what he calls humanship, into our explaining these particular topics. So you'll also remember especially because we're going to talk about poverty prevention, he shared yesterday about the enactment of legislation to address poverty concerns, that was actually a catalyst for his research back in 2004. And we see it again reflected in SRAE legislative intent as an important concern. So let's look at what does topic C say? Well, it's the increased likelihood of avoiding poverty when youth attain self-sufficiency and emotional maturity before engaging in sexual activity. Now, we're going to talk a little bit before we hear from our very dynamic grantees about that there's a confluence of factors surrounding poverty. There's also a great need for developing critical thinking skills to help students connect dots, right? And then we'll look at the success sequence and the need for self-efficacy and skill building. So in terms of the confluence of factors around poverty, this is important to understand. There are many factors, right? Like the quality of education or the region of the country that you live in, family structure, healthcare, accessibility, employment opportunities. All these things contribute to poverty. There's no one silver bullet answer to poverty, and we don't pretend to have that silver bullet. But it is an important conversation to have regarding the link between poverty and teen sex, especially teen parenting. We know that less than half of teen mothers graduate from high school, and they're more likely to live in poverty and have children with lower behavioral and health outcomes. So it is an important topic to discuss with teens regarding sexual choices. Now, are we saying that all teen moms or all children born to teen moms have these? No. But what do we know? We know that social science shows that the likelihood of poverty is exponentially higher for these outcomes. A very significant report by the Obama administration was submitted to Congress in 2014 regarding the numbers of teen parenting and poverty outcomes. And those numbers are holding pretty steady. So we have a lot of work to do. So introducing critical thinking activities into lessons that help students connect their choices about sex and possible outcomes to their overall goals and dreams, and making sure that we're incorporating those activities is really important, because how are we going to have kids be able, or students be able to personalize goals and actualize those goals if they're not able to actually assess and consider the things that may hinder goals, So, remember Dr. Hong's research on how real transformation, which I thought was very powerful today, the difference between change and transformation. It really comes from internalizing beliefs, and that emotional stability increases as one stays on a goal-oriented pathway. So that's a powerful statement. Emotional stability increases as one stays on a goal-oriented pathway. So we have this task, we have this mandate, as it were, to help students find that goal-oriented pathway. And regarding poverty prevention, we share the steps of the success sequence, because it gives a practical way, a practical plan and pathway for students to follow. And we know that, and if you remember the story I shared yesterday about how much students benefit when they have a plan or they know what's going to happen, they benefit from the security and structure that a plan can offer. And the plan is not meant to, be some kind of like hindrance or restriction, but it's a way to guide, right? It was interesting in our small group discussion yesterday. There was a SRA facilitator, and she shared experiences with her own children. And she said when they graduated from high school, they kept saying, "Tell me what I'm good at. Tell me what college I should go to. What should I do? What's the plan?" And so, she could see the need for that. So again, I'll reiterate what I said yesterday, that we certainly should not underestimate the power and the need for goal setting and helping young people do that. So when we share the success sequence, we are offering a plan. Graduate from high school, some get some post-secondary training. Really, this is what the research says. It doesn't have to be a 4-year degree, but some kind of post-secondary training. Get a full-time job, even if it's a low-paying job, because what you're doing in a full-time employment, showing up, you're building soft skills that will, lead you to higher-paying jobs. And then wait until you're 21 to get married and have children after marriage. And what the research says is that this greatly reduces the likelihood of living in poverty. So what do we know further? Well, following the success sequence has, without regard to race or socioeconomic background, it is still effective. Only 9% of young men and women from households living below the federal poverty line, if they follow that sequence, they are economically disadvantaged in their late 20s and 30s, compared to 31% who do not follow that sequence. And this was the results of a study done in 2017 by Wendy Wang and Brad Wilcox. The title of the study is The Millennial Success Sequence. So while there are many reasons for addressing poverty prevention, I want to tell you that when this became a directive from our legislative funding of SRA programs, I wanted to do a bit of a deeper dive into the causes of poverty and some of the lifelong impacts that come with it. And my research and my limited reading, it really revealed a lot, but experts agree that when a child grows up in poverty, the disadvantages experienced regarding physical and emotional health often follow them into adulthood. There are increased issues of poor health, chronic illness, substance abuse, relational instability, and other persistent problems. And these have been, those persistent problems start at a young age for those growing up in poverty. And they become lifelong impacts and can be perpetuated in generations. So we have a lot of good reasons to want to talk about poverty prevention with the youth we serve. And we need to begin, of course, early with inspiring youth with high expectations and providing that plan, that very important plan, and then adding skill building and critical thinking to reach those goals. And that this particular topic can become very, very important as we develop it in helping the opportunity for healthier outcomes and in general poverty prevention efforts. So when we're looking at these, we need to look beyond sometimes just what the topic says, but do that deeper dive that we talked about yesterday to understand why we are having this be such an important criteria for SRA education. All right, so we now will, I'll hand it over to our presenters, and I believe, Natasha, you're going to be sharing with us now how your organization works regarding this particular topic, how you operationalize it. So welcome, Natasha, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marianne. Yes, I noticed in the chat, just so you're aware, Ascend has a really good kind of cheat sheet on that success sequence that someone can get right off the website. And we do talk about that success sequence because it is so empowering in our schools. And so we have this on our PowerPoints, we walk the students through this, it's in their handbook, and we tie this success sequence into our goal setting. And as the speaker was referencing about being real, it's, each one of those steps is a step away from poverty. And so I can tell students I didn't follow all 3 of those steps. I got 2 out of the 3 steps, but that doesn't mean that I can't go back and still work that plan. So that is a more, each step is that protective factor. So again, getting us farther towards that the success of the goals that we're looking for. And so we do those success sequence and we work that into our goal setting in general with students. And we do goal setting in a way that they can take it home with them in their handbooks. There's space for that. But we also talk about our goal setting that we want them to see their goals every single day, especially when we're there in the classroom, because we're going to refer back to it. So we actually have them put their goals on their name tag on the back. So we see their names, they see their goals. So they are inspired every single day. And we have our students do a short-term goal as well as a long-term goal. And depending on where students are at, that short-term and long-term goal might include graduate high school. That might be a short-term goal that's easy for some, and a long-term goal might be that after that post-graduation training or college or a job. For others, the long-term goal might be graduating high school, and the first short-term goal might just to survive the class or a specific subject area. So we really want to push those students into thinking long-term, again, creating that plan and keeping that right in front of them. But we don't just stop there. We also want students to be thinking about their goals, not just for themselves, but those around them that are influenced by them, that they're going to influence in life. And so during our lesson on parenting and teen pregnancy, we talk about, again, we bring things back towards their goals. Will it make their goals more easier or more difficult? Might have to delay or change up some priorities, the decisions that they make. And so when we say, how would the obligations of parenting impact the goals that you have for your future? And we talk about those in their midst, other instructors and people that still accomplish the goals that they set, but some of those goals might change. Some might take a little detour. Sometimes the timing changes, but our decisions impact our goals. And then moving beyond that, what goals do you have for your children? So not just for themselves, but they have the chance to influence a life someday as well. And they might not even be thinking about children at this point, but we're talking about unplanned or unexpected pregnancy. And so if that were to happen, do they have goals about what kind of parent they hope to be? What kind of goals, what's important for their children? What makes the success for a child to thrive? And what dreams do they have, not just for themselves, but for their future generations? And so again, moving those students into that long-term thinking. So we address poverty through that long-term thinking, through that goal setting, but then we also are addressing our self-sufficiency in real practical ways in the classroom. For our high school students, they get to put together a wonderful budget, and we make it fun. We start off with what are some things that they need as a teen in their life. Some fancy shoes, whatever their movie tickets, French fries, whatever that might be. So first they start off with a budget for themselves and for their lives. And then we move them into budgeting now for, as a parent, for caring for someone else and providing for someone else. And so with that comes some difficult decisions and some of that decision-making process that we walk them through. In middle school, we give those middle schoolers a job, and they love that cash, they love that money. And then we talk about where that money goes for rent and for taxes. Who knows about taxes as a middle schooler, right? And then we look at what are some of the resources that they have after a lot of those things are taken care of, then to provide for others. And so the role of parenting comes with a lot of decision-making skills that are necessary, some easy decisions and some not so easy decisions. And comes with sacrifice and some great character building things and opportunities. And so students are asked to readjust their budget and their income to include the care of a child. And then to understand the complexity of emotional maturity, we examine some of the different emotional outcomes, both positive and negative. And we have just a little chart. It's basically, you just draw a square on the board. And in these 4 quadrants that we create, there is a short-term, long-term, positive, negative box. So we just put a T there, and we start dropping in emotional outcomes for teens who have maybe chosen to engage in sexual activity as a teen, and then teens who maybe have chosen to wait and to avoid the risks of teen sex. And so we dialogue with those high school students. They fill those blocks in, and they tell us by high school, they've seen enough drama, they've got enough life experience, they've seen enough movies, if nothing else, to try and put themselves in the place of those different scenarios and what would be the emotional outcomes that come with that decision and those choices. And so the students fill that in, and then at the end, they actually compare. So it's one on each side of their handbook, so they can really see the weight of that decision. And it's usually a long list in the short term and long term of the negative outcomes for teens engaging in sex, and then a good long list for positive short term, positive long term. Really, the positive long terms are really a good box for those teens who are choosing to wait. And then that's very theoretical though. So, and that's kind of at high school level. So we again want to make it practical and age appropriate. For our concrete thinkers in middle school, especially, we actually put feelings on concrete. So they actually get to put some of those negative feelings emotional outcomes into a bag, and they get to feel the emotional outcomes in the weight of those decisions. But we also want to make sure that we're encouraging hope as well, and that the weight of those outcomes will need some work to work through, but it'd be a lot easier if we were to put trust, for example, in there, and some of those positive tools that are much lighter. And then students, again, can feel the difference between some of those positive emotional outcomes. And so that's how we make this practical in the classroom. We do the same with high school with that heavy and light emotional outcomes and positive, negative outcomes. Very similar, just slightly different. And so that's how we really work to promote that future orientation, self-sufficiency, and emotional maturity in the classroom.
Wow. Thank you so much, Natasha. I love how you just started out that you actually begin having them think in the long term. I love the budget, for the French fries, but then, what about buying a crib or, that was great. And the concrete idea, I love that because, it's really even the kinesthetic learner, and we really do need to be paying attention to the types of learners, and that when they can actually feel that. And you're so right. Adolescents, they're concrete thinkers, and putting it on concrete, who would have thought? Very, very interesting. Thank you so much. All right. Our next guest grantee is Cemeka, and Cemeka Smith. Cemeka Agugbuem. I can't say her name, and I've been practicing, but I just can't. But anyway, she is a dynamic lady out of Little Rock, Arkansas. So Cemeka, please share with us how your organization communicates topic C.
Yes, thank you, Mary Ann, for that introduction. Little Rock Life Skillz, let me start back. I have the privilege at Little Rock Life Skillz of serving as both program coordinator as well as a classroom presenter on a regular basis. And so for me, I can never take the dynamic out of moving back and forth between both spaces out of my head. And so, kind of just like Natasha said, we stay in the theory a lot. but we have to eventually get to the concrete. But I think the planning of our implementation is such a critical step in actualizing that I just want to speak to that just a little bit, so that you don't overlook the power of being able to do that. And so kind of think of it like a triangle, right? You have us as a program, we have the gatekeeper, and then both of us are coming together to try to serve the best need of the student. That's one of the ways that I think about it, right? And so every year, having those conversations, no matter if we just served the previous semester, we're re-engaging in conversations with our gatekeepers. What has changed at your schools? What are your students facing this semester? Do you know specific things about the students in your classroom? But if not, what are the dynamics that have changed in your school? And then bringing our own awareness, because we live in the community or we're aware of the community, and bringing those things to the table. And then as a team of presenters, making sure that we all have a buy-in, all have an understanding of what needs to take place. And then not just saying, oh, here's our curriculum and we're just going to present it, but how could we build on this, almost in a way of creating a story? Right? Build on this in such a way that each step that we come in, we're kind of breaking down a barrier that they may have between us and the information that we're presenting, to bringing them to a point where they actualize, that they take ownership for the information that we present for, are presenting to them, right? And so we kind of take this approach of building rapport. Then we want to really reset their mind or reframe their mindset, and then reinforce. It's kind of like 3 steps that we're always working through on a daily basis. So again, building rapport, resetting or reframing their mindsets, and then reinforcing those concepts at every step and every stage. So building the rapport. So what are some of the ways that we do that? So we come in with authenticity and vulnerability. I think Mary Ann just mentioned that earlier, that we all have life stories and experiences that we can bring into these classrooms as individuals that have more knowledgeable individuals of where these young people are, but where it is that they're trying to go, the obstacles and barriers that they have to that. And so we're coming in with that understanding, but also giving the students an opportunity to speak to us about where they are, right? And stepping into their shoes, remembering where our mindsets were when we were sitting in those tables. And then we're trying to reframe by bridging them to the next step. Kind of like Natasha already said, getting them to think forward, but then come back and backwards engineer. Right. So one thing that I love to do when I first walk into the classroom is to just put this statement out here. And I just say, you know what? Well, not you know what, but I'll say you have the capacity to design your life. And I'll just leave them with that statement to sit with it. And then I'll say, tell me what you think I mean by that statement. And then slowly but surely they're processing, and you can kind of see the wheels getting to turn, and you'll get a hand or two that goes up, and they'll say, oh, I think that means that I can create, that I can make decisions, right? So they're beginning to see that, oh, this is what you mean, that I can take ownership and do this for myself. And then I kind of transition into telling them, no matter where you come from, no matter what you have, what you don't have, you have the capacity within yourself. And I believe that you have the capacity. So it's starting to change that belief system that they have within them, because if they don't have that belief system, kind of like we were hearing in the first session, you might get little movements or changes in behavior, but it won't be sustainable. And so I've then used that to transition into actually showing them images of myself from childhood up into adulthood, and showing them my own journey of moving into self-sufficiency, coming from a background of having single parents, coming from a background of dealing with a mom who struggled with addiction, just all of these barriers that I had to overcome, but step by step, keeping my future and my goals in mind and how I was able to arrive there. And so then that kind of gives them that hope that, oh, this is too possible for me. And so once we've kind of reset or reframed that mindset, now we can really get into the information, right? Because if I can't imagine that that's possible for me, then I may hear the information, but it doesn't really register, right? And so then once we've done that, some of the ways that we help to actualize that information for the students is, again, keeping them engaged in critical thinking, right? Mary Ann mentioned this in the very beginning. We can talk at them all day, but we have to give them a little information, allow them to process, and then facilitate their own thought process. So, for example, I just think about one example of a student who really wanted to just frankly, he said, I hear everything that you're saying, Miss Cemeka, but there are just certain things that I want to try for myself. I hear this optimal health thing, but still yet there's something within me. And so stepping back sometimes, and yes, we have our curriculum, yes, we have a purpose, but then allow them as a class to teach each other. So I'll say, why are you thinking that? Tell me what's going on, and allowing that student to get out what's in their head and share amongst their class. And then usually what happens from there, their classmates will start chiming into the conversation. And I simply step out of the mode of presenter, and I become a facilitator of the thought process. Oh, did you guys catch that? Oh, did you see that? Okay, what do you think about that? How does that connect back to the bigger picture? Oh, if he or she goes down this path, how would it affect these different pillars of their optimal health, right? So in the moment, they are processing and seeing each other process how to move themselves. They're actually practicing that self-sufficiency in a way, or moving themselves towards self-efficiency without necessarily knowing that that's what's happening. But again, just constantly building on bringing that curriculum to life with our own stories is a critical thing for us as presenters on actualizing self-sufficiency and just really seeing those students move towards emotional maturity.
Okay. Wow. I don't even know what to say. You know what? I love the SRA grantees. Mm-hmm. You folks are so real, so transparent, and you are making such a difference in the lives of youth. Thank you both, Natasha and Cemeka, for sharing that, and just how you do it, and just even your own transparency. And you actually are actualizing so many of the things that Dr. Hong talked about today. He talked about, that the participants really, it's a participant-centered program, that the research really is what they heard from the participant. Allowing, you allow the student to speak, to hear what they're saying, listening to them, and then letting them respond. So both of you, just brilliant. Thank you so much. I get kind of emotional because I'm proud of you both, and I'm proud of all of you that are on this training. So if I could stand up, you would all be getting a standing ovation. So thank you so much. All right, so we're going to jump to the next topic, and we'll be hearing again from Natasha and Cemeka. And we're going to look at now topic D. And this is the foundational components of healthy relationships and their impact on the formation of healthy marriages and safe and stable families. So we'll talk a little bit about, the healthy relationship consensus that I believe we have, how we broaden that conversation to marriage and families, how there are, healthy marriage initiatives, because why are we funding that as people, as a society, as a government? Because it actually works to create healthier communities. And then a little bit about the intentionality of relationships. So in terms of that consensus, I believe that, most people, everyone agrees that there is a need for healthy relationship education. But the SRAE directive is to go beyond that. So sexual risk avoidance education provides youth with the foundations of healthy relationships, What do they look like? Why are they important? And then broadens that conversation to help youth recognize how those healthy relationships can prepare the way for a healthy marriage, safe and stable family formation. Now, we have to recognize this, of course, because of the lived experience of many high-risk, vulnerable youth that we serve who've never experienced a healthy marriage in their family or home. It's critical to understand and to be highly sensitive to the youth who are living in a single-parent home or youth who have been trauma exposed without nullifying their right to receive the facts about what creates the best opportunity for the healthiest life and relationship outcomes. So, how do we do that? We need to be very sensitive to this, and this is the lived experience. So I would suggest that when we're talking about topic D, we recognize first the Herculean effort that single parents make in raising children. Students need to hear that we esteem their parents. They just need to hear that. It's good for them to hear that, no matter what their situation is. And for those who are trauma exposed, we have to carefully talk about the difference between force and choice in sexual activity, especially in terms of abuse. And I think Tracy mentioned yesterday in the field talk session, we're about triggering hope, not more pain. So we can never really hope to break the barriers or correct the disparities that we care about so ardently if we embrace, a paralyzing empathy that actually works against offering the real solutions and the life-changing messages of hope that can help teens find pathways to thriving that are contained in topic D. So it's important that we don't further disadvantage our high-risk, vulnerable youth, nor other youth by not sharing what we know has been established by social science, that individuals and children do better on almost every measure in the context of a healthy marriage and a safe and stable family. And we believe that it would be truly a disservice not to offer them anything less as they're making their way and journeying toward adulthood, as it were. So broadening that discussion, as we mentioned, we're talking about the value of understanding healthy relationships, especially as they impact family dynamics and a future spouse or possible children. And inspiring them in the moment that the investment that they make now in learning how to build those relationships will help them in terms of ongoing life success and fulfillment. And then, of course, understanding how unhealthy relationships create stress, insecurity, sometimes emotional harm, often emotional harm. And we're building that awareness early. And, some students are living that. So we're not telling them something they don't know, but we're saying this could be a reality, but here's a way, here's a different pathway. We're creating a pathway. And then I just wanted to underscore once again, that the federal government recognizes the importance of healthy relationships relative to marriage by funding programs in the Healthy Marriage Initiative. So intentionally applying knowledge and being mindful of our choices is something that we're striving for in this particular topic. So I don't know about you, but I once again am anxious to hear from Natasha and Cemeka regarding how they address this topic, operationalize this topic in their programs. So Natasha, I'll call on you again to tell us what you do regarding topic D.
Thank you, Mary Ann. what we found especially in today's tolerant world, is that students struggle with knowing how to be kind, accepting, inviting. That's something that, are good things, but then how to balance that with maintaining standards and boundaries in relationships. And so we see like the relationships kind of getting squashed into just kind of one possible relationship. So that's something that that I want to speak to here. But before we get into kind of what that looks like, we start way back at the basics with what are the building blocks of a healthy relationship. And so we ask students for that, and they usually can give us some pretty good things. Some of the things we see a lot of are, respect, communication, honesty and trust. Sometimes I'll have something, actually lately I get loyalty a little bit more, and I don't have a block for that yet, but we'll think about where to include that. And so they'll give us some different building blocks, and we'll ask the students to define that. What does that look like? How would you define honesty and trust, or compromise? And how would you define compromise in a relationship? And so we dialogue a little bit about that, about those different building blocks. And then we also offer a few into the mix. So we'll talk about similar values. And we're talking about something more than your favorite candy bars. We're in love because we like the same candy bar, the same music group. So trying to get, middle schoolers, especially, moving a little bit beyond that into the values are the big things, things that people argue a lot about, all the things you're not supposed to talk about back in the day, money, politics, children, religion, those values that help inform our decisions about big decisions in life. So similar values is a block that we'll include. And then we also talk about unselfish love is a building block that we'll include. And then now that we have our building blocks, we actually ask the students, what are we going to do with this? Because we need to build a relationship with this. And so we're going to build a pyramid. And so we give them just a blank pyramid in their book, and we ask them to take the things that we've talked about, and I don't know if you can see this, but it's just a little cubes of pyramids there. And then they're going to build a relationship. But the thing they have to understand is that not all relationships are the same. And so on the very bottom level of our pyramid are going to be relationships that maybe we didn't choose. It would be relationships with our classmates or our coworkers or our teammates. And so what are the building blocks that we need to get along with this group of people, this type of relationships, in order to accomplish a goal? We have to serve a customer at McDonald's. We have to get a classroom project done. So at that level of relationship, people that we didn't choose to be in relationship with, what are some basic building blocks that are needed at that level? Communication usually fits generally on that level. And then, so they're gonna kind of fill in their blocks at that level. But then we also move up a level. We have other types of relationships. Maybe your coworker or your classmate, you seem to get along, and so you spend more time together, and pretty soon you're best friends. So now at that level, we're investing time, resources, commitment. It's a little bit more we're investing, but we're also expecting a little bit more from that relationship. So the communication with my coworker is, at the bottom level is you get the fries, I'll get the pop, and we'll serve the customer. Communication at the next level up, where there's more invested and there's more expected, is that I'm going to expect my best friend not to, spill the tea, as the kids say, not to post my secrets on social media. So I'm going to invest a little bit more. I'm going to share a little bit more of myself, but I'm going to expect a little bit more in return. So that level might be a best friend. It might be a dating relationship. And then we move to the top level. The top level in our pyramid is going to be the highest level of commitment. And so usually, not always, but usually we'll find these maybe in family type relationships, a parent to a child, or that the highest level of commitment, like a marriage commitment. So at the top level of of these building blocks, what would go at the top level. And so we're creating that hierarchy of different types of relationships that have different levels of commitment, and with that, different levels of expectations and investment. And so, so then we throw that out to the students. We guide them, of course, a little bit more in middle school. And then in high school, again, as Cemeka was saying, we kind of draw back into that facilitator role and have the groups talk about why they put things in different places. I will sometimes get the question, is there a right or a wrong way to build the pyramid? We do have one that we kind of supply for them, but for high schoolers, I'll usually say there's 2 blocks that I would kind of argue about a little bit, that I would have a strong reason for why they're there, but the other blocks, not necessarily. So I learn from my students, and I've seen even where they put the blocks change over the years. So that can be exciting as well. And then with those blocks, we then move into the next step, is that no relationship is without conflict. And often it's when one of these building blocks is misaligned that a conflict will arise. And so we then also have a conflict management kind of tool. We call it CALM. It's an acronym. And that CALM is, first, to control yourself. We talk with students that they cannot control others. We can only control ourselves. We can't control their feelings. We can only control ourselves. And so take a moment, take a breath, control ourselves, put down the cell phone. Don't blow up their cell phone or post on social media. Get in control first. And then from there, A is assume the best and apologize first. So assume that your best friend doesn't all of a sudden hate you. There's some other reason out there for whatever happened. So we're going to assume the best. We're going to assume that they didn't mean any harm, and we're going to wait to pass judgment. So we're going to assume the best. There was some other piece of information we're missing. If there's something we can apologize for, we're going to apologize for that. I apologize. I didn't give you time to explain. I apologize. I didn't understand. I apologize. I didn't ask more questions. So there might not be a lot we can apologize for, but if there is something to apologize for, it's good to kind of get that right at the beginning. And that's going to really change where the direction of that conversation goes. So control yourself, assume the best, apologize first, label the issue. And that's where these building blocks come in and can give vocabulary to our students to say, communication in my family maybe looks different in your family. In my family, we give second and third goodbyes before we leave. Maybe your family, maybe that's not how you communicate. Maybe it's okay to just leave and not say goodbye. So maybe there's a communication thing we need to work on, or maybe it's a respect thing that we need to work on together. So we can kind of label that issue, and then it becomes about the building block and not about the other person. Creates a little bit of space. And then finally, we do the matter of facts. So we're going to talk about the facts and what actually happened. We're going to stay away from motivations, because I really don't know. As much as I think I know, I don't know the motivations the other person has. And so we're going to stick to those. This is the facts of what happened. This is what I observed. This is what I saw. And then we're going to remain calm and let the other person have a chance to really speak into whatever's going on. So that's how we take students through our healthy building blocks, our relationships, all towards that healthy relationships, marriage, and stable families.
Okay, thank you so much, Natasha. I love how very practical everything is. So your cards and the commentary that goes with them, and communication in your family might not be like communication in my family. Just that kind of understanding and flexibility as we're teaching about healthy relationships is really invaluable. So thank you for that very much. All right, Cemeka, we will ask you now your thoughts on topic D.
Yes. So at this point, I mentioned already that we really take time to make sure that our scope and sequence builds up to really address each of the different concepts, of the A through F concepts. And so another aspect of us building that rapport resetting their mindset and reinforcing these things is making sure that they recognize that we are examples in skin to really help them identify with their ability to have this possible outcome, from this best possible outcome, to have a healthy marriage, to have a safe and stable family. And so at this point, they've probably seen my pictures. They've heard my stories about navigating conversations with my husband, dynamics, or, the latest story that week with my children. They've heard our other speakers share similar experiences. But now we want to, and then as it relates to the curricula, they've learned about their emotional needs. They've learned about love languages, right? All of these things on a theoretical level. And now we bring them towards the end and we say, okay, now let's put some of these things in practice. And so one way that they do that is they create their ideal date. And so I recently, actually on Monday, on Valentine's Day, I had the opportunity to do this. So that was really fun. I've never done it on Valentine's Day. And I had a student come up and actually draw a woman and a man on the board and use his artistic skills. So there he's getting buy-in already. And then I told the students, all right, guys, you've learned this, right? These are the things that we've talked about. We've talked about relating to yourself, knowing your emotional needs. We've talked about relating to others and how those things are important. Now it's your turn to put that in practice. So now we're going to go on your ideal date. What are the personality traits for your ideal date? And they just get to going. Oh, communication, good communication. They're funny. They have good conversation, and they're just throwing out, and they're seeing all across this whiteboard, all of their ideas right in front of them, right? So what are those key, those personality traits? And they'll say, oh, great. Now you kind of know what you're looking for. Now let's talk about where are you going to go? What are you going to do? And they give this long list of what they're going to do. Oh, we're going to go, and, one kid said a really amazing thing. He said, oh, we're going to go to an escape room. Oh, why do you want to go to escape room? He said, well, that's going to let me see how they problem solve, right? And so they're, again, getting those things out of their head. They're really thinking about, oh, personally, I can see myself navigating, actually walking, getting to know a person. Getting to figure out my likes and my dislikes, and then understanding that, oh no, the purpose is not just to get to physical intimacy. This really is an opportunity for me to learn about myself and to learn about the other, and for us to develop those healthy emotional connections or building blocks, as Natasha stated. And then after we go through this whole activity and they're hearing from their classmates, or one classmate may say, oh, this happened on Monday. A classmate said, oh, we're going to go camping. Another one, oh, why would we go camping, right? So giving an opportunity for them to see the difference in dynamics, and then saying, okay, how would you figure that out? If this was a person that you were really interested in and they wanted to do this and you wanted to do that, what skills would you need? How would you communicate? Working through and compromising on things like that. So again, in real time, they're talking amongst each other as classmates, seeing all of these different perspectives at the same time. So that's a really fun thing that I always love to do. And then seeing that back to back as you go from one class period to another, that's a whole another fun thing. And then also bringing in panelists, actual couples that can speak into the students, and allowing the students to ask whatever kind of questions that they want, right? Asking, what is it like to be married? Asking, how did you meet? Asking, when this happens in your relationship, how do you overcome that? So getting that, again, more knowledgeable information, and being able to ask those questions unfiltered, without any fear or concern that they're going to receive some kind of pushback. And again, it's seeing those examples right before them to a way that, oh, maybe, just maybe I do want this for myself, even if I have not seen that before. And so by the time they get to the end of the class, we're asking them, okay, based on all of these different pillars of health that we've talked to you about, especially as it relates to your relationships, what's one thing that you're willing to do differently, right? What's your I will that you will now work on, or that you will now take ownership of, to keep you on a path that feeds back into this success sequence that we've taught you about, specifically to moving you from self-sufficiency, goal setting, and future orientation to now, okay, when I become a husband or I become a wife, what are the steps that I'm going to take to mature myself emotionally, to build on those communication skills and emotional needs that I have, so that when we come together, we don't just have a relationship, we have two healthy individuals that can now sustain a healthy relationship. And so those are just some of the practical ways in which you do that, but it also comes through just so many different activities. I can think about puzzles that we do sometimes. I love to take various puzzles, and sometimes I will switch the pieces up and put one puzzle in the package of another puzzle, or I will give them puzzles and I will take out pieces and then bring and then ask them, oh, what happened, right? And this will be an example for working with friendships, because they'll have to work with classmates, and I'll see how they work in terms of dynamics of communication with each other, and then communication with the different groups in the classroom. So all of these different ways to just actualize or put into practice the concepts or building blocks, again, just to take that terminology that Natasha has used, putting it into practice in real time, and then saying, okay, guys, now let's think about when you get out of this classroom, how are you going to use this? How can you continue to put this in practice? Maybe you don't remember everything, but what's the one thing that you will take ownership for and start to do now that will continue to build your skills, build your momentum to getting you from where you are now to that picture that we initially talked about, right? That future picture that we initially talked about, knowing that this is just one of those steps that's going to continue to get you there. And so it's I don't know, I'm kind of like Mary Ann right now, just because I've just recently been in the classroom. I'm kind of getting excited just thinking about my experiences from Monday and Tuesday all over again. But the kids are amazing. And again, kind of like we heard in the first session, just seeing them take that ownership, seeing them take that responsibility for themselves in real time. And like, you know how they always say it's the light bulb coming on, and you see in their eyes like, okay, by the end of that 8 days, by the end of the time of constantly seeing these things over and over, this really may be possible for me now, and I'm willing to put in the effort to try. And then you go back to, again, the kind of things that I said before, the importance of having that connection with the gatekeepers, because we've equipped that gatekeeper and they can continue those conversations after we're gone. We've put resources in their hand, and they've told us what we need, what they need. And I can go and I can say, okay, here's something that you can use now to continue to take your students forward.
Wow, thank you so much, Cemeka. That was great, and I hope that the audience, you can hear the practical application of some of the things that we learned in the keynote today. Just amazing. Just critical thinking and all of it. It's really like coming to life. And I don't know about anybody else, but I would love to have that conversation about camping, because I don't like camping, and I'd really like to see how I negotiated out of that. But anyway, I will now hand the session over. Thank you, ladies, so much, and we'll have a few minutes here for questions. Scott?
Great. Thank you all so much. Gosh, what great practical examples and activities that you provided us to share topics C and D. So thank you all very much. Few questions. This is an opportunity. If you would, drop your questions into the chat and we'll field those into our discussion. But to start us off, first off, Natasha, we had a request if you could share, if you were able to share the pages with the activity that you were sharing with us related to the topic D. If you could share that with the group, if that's a possibility, that would be awesome. And then I'll just throw this question out to start. So what's been your greatest or maybe biggest challenge to implementing topics C and or D with students. So it's not directed to either one of you specifically, but I'll just toss that out to the panel.
One that particularly comes to mind, well, again, as I've said this before, here in Little Rock, a lot of the students that we're dealing with are coming from single parent homes. It doesn't matter, again, socioeconomic status, it doesn't matter race or ethnicity. We're seeing it at every single level in every school. And so that fine balance of, again, not offending and being sensitive to their circumstances and where they are, but then helping them realize that there is a healthier way, right? And so one thing that I've kind of the example that I was discussing earlier about the young man that just flat out said, Miss Cemeka, I hear everything that you're saying, but I still want to try for myself. I still want to try for myself. And just walking him through kind of those emotional needs of saying, okay, do you really care about this young lady in the way that you say that you care about this young lady? Yes. Okay. Now tell me again, what were your future goals? Okay. Oh, and what are her future goals? Okay. And so now he's answering these questions in real time to me. Great. So we know your future goals. We know that you care about each other. We know that you like each other. Now, remind me of what we've taught you about the risk. Tell me what those risks are. And then having, again, in real time, talking me through those risks and saying, now put those two in comparison. If you know that these things are a risk, and if you know on this side, you really care about her and you both have these future goals, is the compromise of that goal, is the compromise of the relationship that you presently have with this young lady that you care about, something that you're willing to risk? And then just leaving that student to kind of have that moment to process that and then come back and say, no, it's not worth the risk, right? So it may be an example of something like that, where instead of rushing through the moment and saying, you really should hear this information, recognizing that, oh, this is a teaching moment of this student is really struggling with the information that we're sharing. And again, using it as a way to just facilitate or journey them through their thought process to realize that it's really not worth the long-term or the long-range goals and futures that you have for yourself or for the young lady in which you're involved with. So that's been one thing where I've received feedback and pushback. And then I've had examples of coming against families of origin. And recognizing that some of them just believe that this is what's normal. It's normal to have premarital sex. It's normal for a child to be separated from their parent. And then again, just asking them, how has that impacted you for real? Like, has that really served you well, or has that served the people that you love and care about well? Okay, what do you think would serve them better based on the things that we've been talking and discussing with you now? And again, it's this just journeying them with their facilitating their thought process and hoping that it will just be just something that encourages them just to pivot just a little bit, maybe not everything in that moment, but just pivot just a little bit to move them further away from risk and towards health. And keeping the conversation always in that context, that this is not just about, we're not trying to, what's the word that I usually say? I'm not coming in here to lecture you, but I am coming in here to journey with you. And what we want for you as a program is to move you a little further away from risk and keep you in a state of health, not just right now as a teenager, but think about that long range that you can't see yet. But 10 years from now, would you have regretted this decision if it compromised, that bigger picture of what you have? And just recognize that the things that you're doing now, it's going to impact you later. So let's make just the small choices, or the small decisions, or rearranging the relationships just to move you a little bit out of risk and towards health. And those things have helped a little bit, but I don't get pushback often. But if I've received any and I notice something like that taking place, I don't rush past the moment. I use it as an opportunity to address it on the spot, because that's what they're going to deal with after we leave. And so I don't like leaving them with that hanging tension. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate that very much from both of you, and a lot of great information. We want to share the contact information for our presenters today. So if you have additional questions, I know there were a couple in the chat we weren't able to field out, but if you would like to, you're able to submit them directly to the presenters today. So we'd encourage you to do that. If you can take a picture on your phone of these contact informations, we thank you. And Julie, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Mary Ann, Natasha, and Cemeka, and all of our grantees joining us today. We'll see you at our next session, the Field Talk. See you soon.